Okay, we've got a few questions that people often ask about installation on boats. Probably the most common one is, where can the fuel cell be installed on a boat? And given that there are two outputs apart from power that you need to think of, it's really pretty straightforward. One is water vapour. Water vapour can be taken over the side, as we've shown you on this video, or alternatively some people are just content to drain it into the bilge. There's not much of it, and it just runs down into the bilge. It will produce maybe an egg cupful every couple of days, so that's vapour. The other item, which we've also shown you, is heat. So the heat needs to be taken into a compartment that the fuel cell is not in. Some people are quite content to breathe the fuel cell into the main saloon of the boat. That's perfectly acceptable. If the fuel cell is not in that compartment, then that's fine. You can position the fuel cell basically anywhere you want, as long as the heat doesn't get returned straight back into the fuel cell. Sometimes customers ask about methanol safety. It's perfectly acceptable to, providing the methanol container is strapped down into its seat, which you've seen, the methanol is fine. The methanol itself can be tipped upside down. The containers are very robust. They're actually cleared for air flight by IATA. So in the back of this boat we have usually got one M10 container in its cartridge holder and another one loose in the back of the boat, and over about 60,000 miles of cruising and 10 years it's never given us a problem. Methanol is best kept off your skin if you can, and certainly not ingested. That's a key thing, but in terms of flammability, it won't explode, but it will burn, so just respect that. But as a fuel for fuel cells, it's fine. We often describe the amount of CO2 in the output as equivalent to a baby's breath, and that's about what it is. It's certainly not equivalent to the amount of CO2 coming out of an adult's breath. Sometimes people ask how long the fuel will last. That's a difficult one to answer because it's rare for people to have a good profile of the amount of electricity they're using on their boat in a day. What I can tell you is that you will get approximately 1 kilowatt hour out of 0.9 of a litre of methanol. The boat we've just installed the fuel cell on is an Arcona 430. It's 43 feet long and weighs about 8.5 tons. We typically will use an average of about 7 amps continuously during the course of a day. Obviously a little more at night, a little less in the day when we've not got the navigation lights on. The 10 amp fuel cell we're using on this boat will easily balance any load we're running at any point in time. So we know that 10 amps is more than sufficient for us on this boat. Most of our customers are spending some of their time in marinas where they're typically plugged into the mains, and some of their time motoring where they're coming in and out of marinas, or maybe there's no wind or whatever. In reality, again, most of our customers perhaps use 2 or 3 10-litre tubs of methanol per year. Fuel cells have a finite life. We tend to measure it in probably nowadays around 7,000, 8,000 hours. So a small fuel cell running flat out all the time won't last as long as a larger fuel cell running only a proportion of its time. That's fairly obvious. But when sizing the fuel cell for a boat, try and understand the exact amount of power you draw during the course of a day. One way of looking at that is, how quickly do you flatten your batteries if you don't recharge them? We're honoured that a number of ocean racers have chosen to use fuel cells to power their boats. In some applications it's particularly useful, and the mini transat fleet in particular almost exclusively use our fuel cells to power their boats. The biggest compliment I've probably had is from a pair of British ocean racers who said the great thing about a fuel cell is you never have to think about charging your battery. The power's always there. The fuel cell will accept an angle of heel of 35 degrees, either laterally or longitudinally. So for most boats that's perfectly acceptable, even when tacking up wind for a day at a time. So the fuel cell will give you reliable power, it's maintenance free, it's virtually silent, and it will give you reliable, hassle-free power for years to come.